So today I'm excited. We're going to welcome Laura Wilkinson. So Laura's a three-time Olympian, 2000, 2004, 2008, Olympic gold medalist in 2000, world champion. Laura, you've been inducted to 5 Halls of Fame. You're a 14-time USA diving national team member, 19 USA diving national titles, two-time NCAA champ, 18 NCAA All-American honors. All of that is incredibly, incredibly impressive. But what I always love, and I'm so fascinated and appreciated by, is when people who have done the work go into helping other people do the work, right? I'm a big believer that if I'm going to teach something, I need to live it, right? And have those personal experiences. And so you're also an athlete mindset and performance coach. You also have your own podcast, The Pursuit of Gold, which I'm excited to be on. And if that's not impressive enough, right, what really, really kind of locked me in is that after 9 years of retirement with 4 kids in tow, you come back to the sport that you love. And as a 43-year-old athlete, you qualify for the finals of the 2021 Olympic trials. So to me, it's just such a cool story. And I just kind of love the evolution. I'm really excited to learn more about you. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. And doesn't that make you want to just go back on the mat and start wrestling again?
It does. It does. But I don't know how much my body can handle it, but it does. It does. And I think about that all the time when I hear these stories. So let me ask you this. So, when I'm always interested how people kind of get started, and I read that like you really got started relatively late to your sport. So you got exposed and really started diving at the age of 15, but then you were discouraged. You were discouraged by adults that either said you were too old, right? Somebody said you were a waste of space. So talk a little bit about like what drew you to the sport, but also motivated you to stick with it despite the lack of that support.
Yeah. So I grew up as a gymnast. And you'll find that a lot in diving, that a lot of us are ex-gymnasts because we have that kind of acrobatic skill set, a lot of ex-trampolinists too. So it's kind of a natural transition. But I grew up, I watched, I'm going to date myself. It was Mary Lou Retton, and I watched her do this perfect 10 vault and become an Olympic champion when I was 8 years old. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And, at like 13, I realized I wasn't a very good gymnast. So, I was like, I still have this dream of going to the Olympics, but I know gymnastics is not going to be that avenue. And so I still had this goal and I still wanted to get there, but I knew I had to find another path. And so I started trying a whole bunch of different sports. And I was good at all of them. I enjoyed all of them, but it wasn't the same. I think I missed the flipping and stuff. And so I didn't find diving until the end of my freshman year of high school. So I was 15, almost 16. And I ran into some ex-gymnast friends that had started. And so that's how I kind of got connected into the diving world. And the next year, so my sophomore year of high school, I was on the high school diving team as well as like our club team. And our high school swim coach did not like the divers because we just took up a lane of the pool. We were, annoying to him, and he really didn't like me because it was a period during the day. So it was an actual class that we had to go to. And a lot of people would just skip it because he didn't want us there. But I was a good kid and I showed up to class every day, and he resented me for it because then I had to use up a lane of the pool or I had to be there. And he just didn't like that. And so he threatened, either you get out of this class or I'm going to start lowering your grade. And I had really good grades and that wasn't an option. And so it kind of put me in a really bad corner, and nobody at the school really stood up for me. My mom was furious. We talked to counselors, whatever. They all were just like, well, just drop the class. So it was a frustrating time, but, because my mom was so like on my side, I knew that this wasn't me. It wasn't a me issue. And my club coach at the time, Kenny Armstrong, who ended up being my coach for almost 30 years. He was just telling me like, look, high school diving, if your dreams are to go to the Olympics, like high school diving is not going to get you there. Like what we can do here, that's going to get you there. And you need to trust me with that. And the fact that he believed in me when other people were doubting me, that really, I just chose to believe him. And so I kind of latched onto that and was like, I will do just about anything you tell me to do if it's going to get me to this goal.
So it's awesome. I mean, it sounds like, a lot of times we're so focused on what people think about us, adults in our lives, right? And, here you are, trying to find a way to compete, to meet your dreams. Like, you find your people and your gymnast people that say, hey, come over here. This is what we're doing. But then you're discouraged. You're discouraged by adults, like coaches, administrators aren't necessarily supporting you. but you find those few people, right? And I think it's an important point. Like you find those few people that give you enough belief that say, you know what, these are the people I'm going to trust. I can sort of listen to what all these people are saying, or I can sort of trust these one or two people. My mom is supporting me in advocating for me and helping me advocate for myself. So she must believe in me, right? At least believes in me and my the right that I have to be able to pursue this, right? And then you've got a coach that says, listen, let's come over here. If you trust me, we'll do this together. And I think that ability to look at it doesn't have to be everybody, but a few people that really believe in you, it opens enough of a door, right? That I think can really kind of bring you in. So let me ask you this. So as you're kind of now navigating your diving process, if you will, and you're getting comfortable with it and you're learning about it, 1998, you win the Goodwill Games. 1999, you win a D1 national championship. But then you're getting ready for the Olympics, right? The Sydney Olympics in 2000, right? Like you're accomplishing your goal. You're meeting your goal. Like you're getting there, right? Like everything is lining up. You've had some victories. You've had some success. Like whatever everybody else said in the past is like, like you're proving them wrong. You're proving yourself right. And right before shortly before the Sydney Olympics, you shatter your foot in a training accident. So I wanted you to talk about the recovery process, sort of how it impacted you and the recovery process, but really how you had to shift your training and really start to train more mentally to not only stay focused, but also to be able to actually improve and continue to make progress physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had actually left my college scholarship. So I did 3 years at school, and that was through 99. And the Olympics were coming, and the Olympics were going to be held in like September. So it was a really awkward time. And back then they didn't have all the nice waivers they do now, like Olympic waivers. You could only redshirt if you were injured. And I was like, well, even if I, found a way to do this and I could come back, then I couldn't even come back till the January semester after the game. So I just didn't know. And I was like, but I know I need to train full time. Like, and I know school and competing for school and trying to do it's so much. Like the collegiate season is so draining, especially while you're doing school. I was like, I just need to focus on training. If this is my one shot at the Olympics, like I need to go after it. And so I left my scholarship and I went home with about 2 months, rent saved in my pocket. So it was exciting, but it was also stressful because I was like, how am I going to pay rent so that I can do this thing I want to do? And, my dad helped me find an agent who helped me get my first sponsor that paid pretty much just enough so I could like eat and be there and do the thing, it was just like minimal. So I was like, I am living the dream. This is awesome. Right. And then March 8th of 2000, I was in Florida we were at a meet and I was doing like a typical warm up where we do flips or somersaults onto mats. And I was going off of a block of wood. And I came out of this one somersault a little early and I hit both the balls of my feet on the block of wood. And, it hurt really bad. Obviously, I couldn't really move my foot, but we didn't know how bad it was. I had to kind of just sit there and wait till the workout was over so that my coach could take me to the emergency room. So, I'm in a lot of pain just trying to ice things for a couple hours. And he eventually takes me to the emergency room where the doctor just tells me it would hurt more and be more swollen if it was broken. So he doesn't even x-ray it. And we're like wanting to hope for the best. We're like, oh, great. Maybe it's just jammed. It's not a big deal. But I was in excruciating pain that night. And I remember I couldn't sleep. And I was stuck there for almost a week because that was how our flights were. And I couldn't get back for like 6 days. And I was not sleeping. I was in pain. It was just like such a miserable, this is 3 months before the Olympic trials. We get home and my doctor x-rays it, comes into the room with tears in her eyes and just says, if I'd seen it right when it happened, maybe I could have reset it. I kind of broke the 3 middle metatarsals, but one of the bones actually had lodged itself underneath my foot. And within just those 6-7 days had calcified to the 2 bones next to it. So it was stuck there. So she's like, the only way we can fix this now is to re-break everything, pin it back together, and that puts you out of trials. Like you will not recover in time to go to trials. And I was like, well, what's my other option? And she's like, well, there isn't really one. We could cast it the way it is, but we don't know what that's going to do. We don't know if it's going to be stable enough to jump off of, maybe even walk on. So we just did that because I was like, well, if I have to have surgery anyway, let's just cast it. If it doesn't work, we'll just do the surgery later because it's already how it's going to be. So we just casted it that way. And that first week, that like mix of emotions, you know, I mean, I was angry, I was depressed, I was feeling all of it. There was almost a time where I felt almost some relief, you know, because there was this great pressure to accomplish this big goal, but well, now I have a broken foot, so if I don't do it, you know what I mean? Like these weird things come into your head, and like I thought of all of them, and I just remember kind of feeling the weight of it. Like, you know, have you ever felt that just like the weight of the world feels like it's on your shoulders, especially when it's your dream you're facing and all these things. It's like it seems to be collapsing in front of you. And I remember just falling to my knees in my living room, dropping my crutches and just like crying out to God, like, how can this be part of the plan? Like, I left everything. I left my scholarship. I left my friends. I left everything that was good and right in my world to try to do this thing that I thought I was born to do. And this is my great reward, you know? And I was just having it out, you know, with God there on my living room floor. And I remembered in those moments, like, this was my dream since I was an 8-year-old little girl. And this might be the only time that I get to go after it. I don't care if I have to drag myself up there with one foot, like I have to at least try. I don't want to look back in 5 years and go, what if? Could I have? Like, I couldn't live with that kind of regret or just not knowing. I'd rather go and fail and at least know that I gave it everything I had. And so I kind of had made up my mind in those moments that that's what I was going to do. Whatever it took, I was just going to get there and I was going to give it everything I had. And my coach is as crazy as I am, I guess, because I remember him coming. It was probably like the next morning. He comes banging on my door at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm stumbling out of, I'm hopping to the door. And I remember opening the door and he's wagging his finger in my face and I'm like hopping backwards. And he's like, look, if we're going to do this thing, we got to be on the same page and we got to make a plan going forward and we can't look back, you know? And I was like, okay. Cause I had already made up my mind, but he didn't know that. And so he was like, oh, okay then, you know? So we kind of decided like, all right, we have to make a new plan. We can't do what we were planning on doing. It's got to be more creative. And he's really creative and good at thinking outside the box. But the one rule he gave me was, we make this plan and we're all in. We can't look back. You cannot look back and say, what if I hadn't broken my foot? What if, like, that's just not even, I don't want to hear about your foot. I don't want to know what could have happened. Like, we are only going forward with this new plan. And I had to buy into that. And he kept me accountable to that. So we did stuff like, we did a lot of video study. You know, I would watch the best divers, the ones I was trying to emulate, but I would also put together like my dives, the best ones that I had done and the order I was going to compete them. And I would watch them over and over again. You know, I'd put on my headphones and listen to my favorite songs that I'd like to listen to in meets while I'm watching these dives. So anytime I heard the songs, it was almost like the dives, you know, would come on an instant replay in my brain. And then when I was supposed to be in the pool, he would take my crutches and I would hop up on my one good foot all the way up the ladder to all the levels. And I would kind of shimmy my way out onto the end. And I would do all the motions, all the actions of my dive. And he would stand on the side and he would coach me. He would coach we called it pretend diving. They have a fancy word. They call it modeling now, but we called it pretend diving. And he would coach me from the side of the pool deck. And it was so weird because I remember moments where I would do something like an action. I was like, oh, you know, that probably make me back off. I'd feel short of vertical on that. And sure enough, he would say something like, nope, you backed off. That'd be short of vertical. And I was like, whoa, how can he see? I'm pretending to dive and he can see what I'm doing. And I started to realize how important this technique was. Like, he could see even on just my actions, I was emulating what I was doing right and wrong. And, you know, I was up there so much. I mean, if there were people in the workout with me, he would make me wait my turn in line, try to feel like I was in there, you know, but it did a lot of things because when you dive, like a lot of times if we take a break from platform and we go back up there, it's really scary again because it's 3 stories, you know, and you're hurling your body off and it can hurt really bad. If you do it wrong, you can get really injured. And so it's scary and it takes a while of being up there again to get comfortable. But I was up there every single day for like weeks on end as I was in this cast and going through this, which I didn't normally do. So I was actually a lot more comfortable during this process, like coming out of it, than I normally would have been. Plus all this extra time I had, I wasn't just doing, you know, 3 sets of my list of dives. Like, I would start to imagine competition scenarios. I knew who all of my competitors were. I knew all the dives that they did. I knew the order that they usually did them in. I knew the order I did mine in. I knew that I was usually really good at coming from behind, but I wasn't good when I was in the lead. Like, I put myself in every situation and would imagine every different thing happening, you know, and do a different scenario every time I was up there. And I just started to put myself in all these different places. And I only had, once I got my cast off, I only had about 2.5 weeks in the water before our Olympic trials, which is like zero time to prepare for any meet, let alone Olympic trials. But because I was so prepared, like I ended up winning that meet by 40 points. And I made my first Olympic team, which was awesome. But what it did that I wasn't expecting, excuse me, because if I hadn't broken my foot, I think I would have had a good shot at making that Olympic team. But what I realize now is that if I hadn't broken my foot, I would not stood on top of the podium at the Olympic Games. But breaking my foot and going through all of that prepared me for every possible scenario. And the finals was a little crazy for me, but because of what I had been through, it prepared me for that moment, you know?
So, I mean, I love this, right? Because like as you're telling this story, I'm like kind of imagining it and I'm seeing it, right? And obviously what I do is I'm just fascinated about how awesome it is, but also that, you know, at a time where this isn't really an active part of training, not to this extent, right? And so the fact that you and your coach kind of came together and, you know, said, okay, this is what we're doing. And we're not even going to talk about the foot, right? I think that's an important concept too, because the more we talk about something and the more we hear ourselves talk about it, the more we think about it, right? And we know that negativity is more powerful than positivity. We also know, by the way, that when we speak out loud, that adds like a value of 10 times more power to it, right? And we tend to focus on negative things a lot. So if you're constantly talking or thinking about it, and then you're verbalizing it out loud, that's going to increase how much power that has in your brain. And so the idea to say, look, we're not going to talk about this. We're going to go forward and we're going to focus on what we can do. That in and of itself is incredible. But then the idea to really put together a mental training program that allows you to get more and more exposure to being that high and get more comfortable with it, going through the movements, right? I think why that's so important is that you're engaging your brain and you're sending signals to your muscles. And so you're making these connections, right? And you're sending these signals through those nerves that go from your brain to the muscle to be able to do it over and over and over again, right? And ultimately, right, I'm not a diver. You put me up 3 stories, like I'm terrified. But ultimately, the dive and the entry to the pool is just a product of being in the right positioning, right? And so if you know, are standing in the right place, right? You're elevating in the right place, your feet are in the right place, your hands are in the right place, your entry in the pool is more likely to be in the right place. And so you were able to do all of those things and lay that foundation and make those connections from your brain to your muscles and lay those tracks in a way that went over and over and over again and really solidified that so that that signal is crisp, it's clear, it's sharp, it's fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that is without even entering into the pool, let
Right.
alone the confidence that comes with you knowing I can do this. I can do this. I can even predict what it's going to look like without even having done it. Also adds a lot of confidence, right? Because you have then a lot of power over what happens just surely by the way you think and what you've done. Now this is fascinating. You just said something. You said all of that work that I did. You said I would have made the Olympic team anyway, I think. But then you said all of that work that I did because I had a broken foot prepared me to be on the podium at the Olympics. And you just said because it was a kind of a crazy final. So
Yeah,
talk about that, right? Because you were a little bit far behind,
a little
right,
bit.
to win a gold medal, right? Like, and so talk about this idea of like overcoming these odds and expectations, being in that place, being in 8th place, right, going in to like again mindset, thoughts, emotions, all of these things. Sort of, how did you manage that to put yourself in a position to win the gold?
So I think it's important that it didn't just happen in the final. Like it happened going into the final too. Like I had an okay prelims. I was in like 5th place. I'd like missed one dive. And then we had a semifinal where they add the prelims and the semifinals together. And it wasn't my greatest set of like, we did what were like more basic dives called voluntary dives back then. It wasn't the greatest. And they added those together to give us our rankings. And so I was in 5th, but then they dropped those preliminary scores and just carried the semifinal ones over to the final. So really point wise, I was in 8th place going into this final, but ranked 4th. So like, that's the way I dove with the top 4 girls going after me. And, you know, I knew I'm a numbers person. I always look at the numbers. I knew I was 25 points back from the leader. I knew I had 0 degree of difficulty over anybody ahead of me. And they were all really good because I'd watched them train for a month and I don't think anybody ever missed anything. So I knew all these things. Like I knew what the situation was. I wasn't like sugarcoating it in my brain or lying to myself. Like I knew exactly what I was walking into. But you know, I was preparing myself that like, this is my one opportunity that I'll ever get. Maybe, you know, like I've just assumed that. So I have to give it everything I can. I can't just walk away and go, wow, it doesn't look good. Like let's stop, you know. I had to look at it like, this is impossible, but I'm going to try to do it anyway because nobody's ever done it. So why not just be the first person? You know, I was building these things up in my head. And I remember like, as we were getting marched out beforehand, you know, they say our names and we like wave to the crowd or whatever. And I remember as we're doing that and we're walking off, I'm looking at those 4 people in front of me that are doing really well. It's 2 Chinese and 2 Canadians. And, you know, I kept thinking about how good they were and how consistent they were. And I wasn't those things, but I kept thinking, well, they were in practice, you know, that it doesn't matter what you've done in practice. Like all that matters is what happens in the meet. So it doesn't matter. Like these 5 dives are really what does it. And this quote, I love quotes, I love verses. And so I hide them away in my heart and my brain so I can pull them out when I need them. And this one that I love kept coming to me, and it says, you don't have to have the lead if you have the heart to come from behind. And I knew I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the strongest. I didn't get in the water the cleanest. I didn't have the most degree of difficulty, but I knew after what I had been through to just get there that I had heart, that I had something maybe they didn't have, because I had been through this extraordinary 6 months building up to it. And as we started the finals, like the first 2 dives, I mean, I did good dives. They were solid, you know, they were like 8, 8.5, but like the top 4 girls were getting 9s. So not only am I not closing the gap, I'm actually falling a little bit more behind. But you know, I'm just trying not to think about it in the midst of the meet. I'm just trying to stay, you know, in the moment in my dive. And the 3rd round is coming, 3rd of 5, and this is my best dive. And I know it's my best dive. And I'm like, all right, so this is, I'm still feeling good. I'm like, this is going to be great. I put my headphones on, and this is going to date me a little bit. I know you've said we're the same age, so you're going to understand, but this was back before iPhones and iPods, and you can't just plug it into the wall to charge it up. I had a Discman, you know, and it required 2 AA batteries. And my headphones, my Discman died in that moment going into my 3rd round. And, you know, to get in that athlete zone that we love, that zone is that, you know, it's that perfect place of like, you have the nervous, excited energy, but you can control it and put yourself in that place. It's that beautiful balance where you can just be in that flow state. And I love to listen to music like a lot of athletes to get there. I can pump myself up or bring myself down. I can make myself feel how I need to feel. But my Discman is dead. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? So like anybody, I panicked. I totally panicked, you know, but in the middle of my panic, I kind of started laughing. So I'm like, this would totally happen to me in the most important moment of my life. All I did was not pack 2 extra AA batteries. Like, this is so dumb. And I started laughing and realized that at the Olympic trials, when I got 10s on this dive, I didn't have headphones on when I was on the 10 meter. When I got 10s on it at nationals, like 3 weeks ago, I didn't have my headphones on, you know, up on the platform. Like, I don't have music on when I'm doing the dive in the competition. Like, I can do this without music. And I had prepared for this, and I ended up giving myself like the world's greatest pep talk walking into it. This is my best dive. I know I can hit it. I know exactly what to do. And I remember when I walked out, like they called my name, they blew the whistle, and I walked to the end and I put my arms out. And I just knew before I went, like, this is going to be amazing. And it was like 9s and 9.5s, drilled it. It was great. So excited. My coach was like, awesome, calm down. You got 2 dives left, you know? And I'm like, okay, whatever. I dip in the hot tub. I go back over to like where I was sitting, but now I don't have headphones again. So I'm like, okay, well, I got 2 dives left. My hardest dive is coming. So I'm like, okay, I really got to start thinking about it. I'm going to start visualizing. I'm just going to kind of like, just try to stay in my place. But I'm hearing the scores now. And so I start hearing these really low scores. And I was like, oh crap, did I spend too much time in the hot tub? Because we were going in order of rank. So the top 4 girls were going after me. So when I heard low scores, I thought they started the round over. I thought like I had a time warp or something. So I was listening for the next girl's name, but sure enough, it was the other Canadian athlete. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's just weird. Canada missed, you know, whatever. I got to think about my dive. I'm trying to get myself back into this place. And I hear low scores again. And I'm like, okay, like this is really odd, but I can't worry about what's happening. I couldn't see the scoreboard. So it's like, I just have to be in my place. And then both the Chinese athletes also missed their dives, like really bad. And I'm like, this is weird. And I'm realizing what's happening in real time. And I had no idea that put me in the lead at that point. but what I knew was I was within striking distance at least. So, I mean, I hit a dive, they screwed up. I had to at least be within striking distance. And when so I'm like, okay, well, I need to calm down because this is my best dive. And now I'm realizing what's happening. And so I go over to Kenny because this was also the dive I had struggled with a lot because it was the action I broke my foot on. So you stand backwards, but you throw toward the platform. So it was scary. I was afraid I was going to hit my foot again. But it was also very painful because I had to stand on that bone that was lodged under my foot and put all my weight into it to throw at the platform. So it was this really scary and painful dive. And I'd struggled with it since coming back. That was kind of like my Achilles heel, if you will. And so I'm like, well, I'll go talk to Kenny. Kenny will know exactly what to say. He always knows what to say. I walk over there and he looks right at me and he goes, do it for Hillary. And he walks off. Hillary had been a teammate of mine that died in a car accident 3 years before. And so I'm like, okay, I'm in the most important moment of my life. And he tells me something that's going to make me cry and just leaves, and what am I supposed to do with that? But I had trusted him with everything up to this point. And I know he likes to push my buttons sometimes. And so I had to trust him. I had no other choice in that moment, but to trust him. I have to think about her. For some reason, he wants me to think about her. So I got to think about her. And as I'm walking up the stairs, I just started thinking about a lot of things that had happened, like leading up to the event. And Hillary had been a really good gymnast. She was the first alternate on the 1992 Olympic gymnastics team. And she had started diving a year later, the same time I did. And so our team kind of became fast friends. We were a whole group of ex-gymnasts together. And so I'd had conversations with her, like, do you think if you got to trials again, like for diving, would you go? Would you try to make the team again? And she's like, I don't know if I could come so close and miss again. But if anyone on our team is going to do it, it's going to be you. And I kind of realized in these moments, as I'm thinking about this is what I'm thinking about walking up the platform, not my dive, not anything going on, but I'm thinking about her and these conversations we've had. And I realized that this was an opportunity she always wanted, but would never have. And I realized that I had all these teammates. When I was up there on 10 meter doing pretend dives, I looked like an idiot. And people were making fun of me in the swimming pool. I was like, how is pretending to dive going to get me to the Olympics? But these little stinking kids on my team started cheering for me. And I would do like a pretend entry and they would start clapping and be like, I didn't see a drop of water. I'd give it a 10. And they were like, they made me realize that I wasn't alone in it. And I realized in that moment on the platform that this might be their opportunity. Those kids, not all of them are going to get this opportunity. And so I realized that this was way bigger than just me with this dream of getting a gold medal. And it gave me purpose. And I remember walking to the end of the platform and turning around and lifting my arms. I felt like I was 6 feet tall. I'm not anywhere near 6 feet tall. I felt huge and I wasn't scared. And I was like, if I'm going to hit the platform, you better believe I'm going to hit it looking good. And I am going to do everything I can to do this action. And it was the best one I had done since I broke my foot. And that kept me in the lead. And I really think that was the moment that ultimately helped me win the Olympic Games, because I realized it wasn't about me anymore. And the last dive was a good dive. It was solid. I had to wait for the girls to see what would happen after that. But one of my favorite moments from that Games that was in the last dive, the crowd was apparently on my side. I didn't even realize it until that dive. Before I was going, they were just screaming like crazy, 17,000 people. And I remember I had this panoramic picture in my head because I was like, I don't know after this dive if I'm going to finish first or fifth, but right now I'm living out my dream. And I know where my coach was sitting. I can see where my family was. I could see where my teammates were. They were like waving the flag and going crazy. And I just wanted to remember that moment, because whatever was about to happen, this was my moment, and that's probably actually my favorite moment from the Games. But yeah, so it was a little bit kind of a crazy final.
Well, it's incredible, right? I mean, first of all, you're an incredible storyteller, right? Because like you're taking me through this experience that you had several years ago, and like I'm getting antsy and goosebumps. I'm like, wait, what happened? Like, but so it's awesome to hear it from your perspective, right? It's something that people can watch and can kind of have that outside perspective, but to really get your perspective in terms of what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're thinking. And I love sort of like every good story has plots and twists and tragedies, and like, the fact that your headphones die and your batteries die, like it's incredible. Like it's scary, but and the fact that you're able to kind of then just take a moment and laugh. There's a couple things I want to highlight that you said within this story that I think are valuable. One is this idea, and it sounds like you didn't intentionally do it, but this idea of like that you just started laughing, right? typically we laugh, and you know this, but typically we laugh when things are funny, when things are enjoyable, right? And so there's this connection within our brain that when we laugh, we're happy, right? And so that releases certain chemicals, right? It releases certain chemicals like serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and stuff like that. And, typically it comes from that emotion or feeling happy, and then it sends a signal and we smile and we laugh, and that's the motor response, right? But you kind of instinctively had this motor response almost because like you're either going to laugh or cry, right? And you laugh, but then because that signal and that connection is already made, it's sending a signal up to your brain that you're happy, right? And it's releasing those chemicals, and that ends up helping calm you down, because once you release serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin, you're more relaxed and you're more calm, and you're like, okay, and you're able to think more clearly, and you start thinking about all these times in the past of when you dove without headphones. So it inevitably ends up almost tricking your brain. It's not really tricking your brain, but what it's doing is it's going in the opposite direction, and it's signaling to your brain, hey, we're happy. Like, this is great, without intentionally doing it. I think that's an important concept that, it sounds like you kind of stumbled upon. But the other thing is this idea that, like, when we're in these big moments where it becomes about us and we take on all this pressure. And so in that moment when your coach said that, it took the focus off of you. And you just said it was about more than just me, right? It was about, and it was even more than just Haley, right? It was like all the people, it was her believing in you, right? Remember all those people that didn't believe in you, but you had a few that did. But then it's like those memories of those kids cheering you on. And it's like all that experience and everything that went into it. And it sounds like you were able to kind of take a moment then and even appreciate and have a moment of gratitude where you were like, this is my dream. I'm having my dream, right? Regardless of what happens. So we know that, when we have appreciation and gratitude, that helps us become more successful. We know that that releases certain neurochemicals that help us calm down. You also, again, this ability to take your focus off of you and be able to kind of then see it from a different perspective, minimizes some of that pressure and that stress, right? And that sort of like narrative in your head, right? And again, this ability to laugh in probably one of the most uncomfortable moments to date, right? But to again then kind of signal to your brain. And this is sort of, I wanted you to talk about this because it leads to my next question, which is this idea that, and I've read this, that one of the things that kind of sets you apart from your competitors is your smile, right? And that you're always smiling. And that's evident in our conversation. But I just wanted you to talk about like how valuable that is for you, right? Like, I mean, it's something that I imagine other people notice and they're like, oh, she's always smiling. That sets her apart. Like, that's really cool. But how valuable is it for you that you're able to do that in these moments?
Well, I think that's something I made up my mind to do before I got to those moments, because I just always really loved the sport and I enjoyed it. And so I think that just came out, and I would try to make up my mind before all the competitions that, okay, well, I'm gonna have memories of this one way or the other. So like let me just make good memories. Let me like walk to be determined to like and enjoy this moment and have a good time. Meet may or may not go well, but I can still walk away with good memories, make friends, like have a good time, learn stuff. And so that was always kind of my mindset going into it. So I think I was just always pretty happy. I mean, not that I'm happy all the time, or, that I'm not smiling. I mean, there were definitely times in meets where I was really upset, but I would try to remind myself, like, look what you get to do, like last dive, maybe that sucked, but like, this is a new opportunity. This is your chance, have fun, enjoy the moment. And I think that's just always kind of been how I walked through the process. So the smiling part was just a natural extension of that. But I did get some funny nicknames. Somebody was calling me the angel of death because they said, like, she's so happy. She's like a sweet little angel. And then she'll kill everybody in the competition. Like, I'm not sure I like that nickname, but it was, and some people thought it was just a poker face. Like, oh, she just smiles all the time, so nobody knows how she's feeling. I was like, well, everybody else is like this all the time. So, I mean, whatever, like, I'm just going to have a good time and enjoy it. And so it was just a natural extension of what I decided to do. Yeah.
No, and that's what I love. I mean, you chose, right? Like then that's where I wanted to go with this. And that's kind of what I believe is like, look, there's so many things that we can't control. And we think of happiness a lot of times as a byproduct of like when things go well or we have amazing experiences, then we're happy. Then we're happy, right? And so many people are chasing happiness, but you're also making a choice to be happy. You're making a choice to and you said it was my mindset, right? Like you made a choice in your mind that this was going to happen before the outcome, right? That you're going to enjoy the experience. You're going to enjoy the memories. You're going to enjoy the relationships. Again, it goes back to like that appreciation and that ability to enjoy it. And so it's going to have a different memory. It's going to have a different place in your brain. It's going to be packaged differently, and you're going to be more willing and better able to come back to those things. So regardless of the outcome, whether you finish first or you finish fifth or you finish eighth or you don't even, make it to the finals, like the experience itself is still going to be meaningful because you're actively making a part of your process, which is another word you said, right? And I love that. And I just think it's so important to understand that like we do have certain choices, and the choice to smile, the choice to be happy, the choice to appreciate what you get to do, right, versus what you have to do, is something that's
I would,
within all of us.
and I would even go further with the happiness thing, because I think happiness and joy are very different. We chase happiness, but happiness is like based on the happenings. It's based on your circumstances and what's going on that makes us naturally happy. But joy, we can choose. Joy, it's like happiness that you choose is what joy is. So that can be sustaining even when your happenings aren't great. You can still choose joy in that moment. You can still choose to find good things that are going on when it doesn't feel like good things are going on. Like it is always there, but you have to look for it. You have to be active in that choice.
No, I think that's great. And it's something you can train, right? Because the more you
Totally.
look for it, the more you're going to find it. The more you find it, the more you're going to appreciate it.
Mhm.
And you're going to start to develop the skill set of looking for it and finding it, right?
Mhm.
In sometimes the most unlikely of circumstances.
Mhm.
Um, Speaking of unlikely circumstances, so 9 years after retirement, you decide to compete again, and make it to the Olympic trial finals with your four kids watching. And you said this really spoke to me. You said, if they can actually see you doing it, that makes a bigger lasting impression. So I wanted you to talk about sort of like this idea of, as adults, we tell kids what to do. We tell kids about our experiences. We tell kids why, like you need to do this, you need to do this, right? And sometimes we'll even go a little bit further and explain to them why we're saying that. A lot of times we don't even do that. We just say, do this, do this, do this, right? You need to work hard. You need to believe in yourself. You need to be positive. And they're like, okay, great. But, you know, a lot of people who have had those experiences will go further and kind of explain the why. But you were able to show them, you were able to kind of show them, number one, what was a big part of your life and what was so important and how cool it was. But also, again, just to share and redefine your relationship with your sport in the context of your family. So I wanted you to talk about that because I think that's a very unique opportunity that very few competitive elite athletes get to do. And so talk about that experience. And again, how meaningful that was to you, but also to your relationship with your sport and with your family.
Yeah, and I think a big part of this is like leading by example. Like kind of like you said, we can tell kids what to do till we're blue in the face. We can even tell them why, but if we're not doing it, why would they do it? If I'm telling them not to say bad words, but that I'm over here and they're hearing me cuss out somebody all the time, like why would they listen to me? Like what? Because why am I telling them to do one thing but I'm doing another? Like we have to set the example by living a certain way, and that became apparent to me very young. And let me preface this by saying, like, I love talking to people, but I am not a social person. Like, I'm a very introverted person. So I tend to be especially in a big room, I'll tend to be the quiet one that's just paying attention. I observe a lot and I think a lot. Like I'm a dweller. Like I love to think about things. And I remember, this is embarrassing, but I got a tongue ring when I was like, I don't know, 19 years old or something, 20 years old, something like that. And I remember one kid on the team who was really young was like, that's so cool. I'm going to do that. And I was like, I am not going to be that kind of example. I don't want this kid doing that because that's what I did. And I realized that even we don't think people are paying attention to what we're doing, like people are always watching. And I think I took it out that night. I was like, I don't want to be that kind of example for these kids. I want to be different. And so I think we have to realize that, especially our children, but like whoever you're around, even your colleagues or whatever, like people are paying attention. So what kind of example are you setting from them? And it's not to put pressure on you, but it's to say like walk the walk. Like don't just talk about it, like be that person, because nobody's going to listen to you. What good is your word if you aren't living that out, And it was really funny because with the whole pandemic, it was kind of a nightmare when the world closed down and the Olympics were postponed for a year. and we had to like train out of our homes. And I had nothing here. Well, my coach let me bring home a couple of mats so I could do some flips in the backyard or in the garage. And at first it was so annoying because my kids just wanted to like be in there with me. And I was like, I'm going to land on you. Like, this is not fun for me. I like to be doing my thing. I like to have control over my training. And I was like going a little crazy because they were all up in my business, and they're really little. And finally I was like, okay, the Olympics aren't tomorrow. Like, nothing is happening for a long time. So like, I just need to let them be part of this with me. So they would, I would do a flip. They would join me. Like, we would do rotations. My littlest one would try to coach me. She was like 5 at the time. It was really funny. But it kind of became our thing. But they also saw that I was working out like all day long. Like, they would see me do Zoom meetings up in the game room with our team, and we're doing these HIIT workouts and things like that. And they'd see mommy's face all red and sweating. They would try to join me. They'd bail out early. It was cool though, because they actually got to see what I do all the time. Not just that mom goes over here and does stuff and she comes back. Like, I'm actually seeing the work that mom's putting in, and I have no idea if they're going to remember that or not, but I'm hoping it leaves some kind of impression in the back of their heads so that when they get to that point in their lives, they remember. My oldest is in volleyball now, and I'm seeing the side of her. I mean, she's good, but she's not like the best player out there. She's getting better every day, which is cool. But she is such a leader on that team. She's the first one to pick up the ball. She's the first one to help out. She's always the one cheering everybody on. Like, she's always like that type of person. And I wonder, like, is this because she watched me? Is this just her natural inclination? It might be, but maybe she saw some of what I've done, and I did explain the whys, so I am an explainer. Cause I got a lot of good advice, but not always a lot of explanations. And so I like to do that, but then also lead. So, I'm hoping it leaves a mark somehow, but only time will tell.
Well, I think it's really cool though, and we talked about this just earlier when you were on the, when you were in your final dive, right? And you took a moment to reflect on your experiences and remembered those kids that were cheering you on, right? And they were like, I didn't see a drop of water. And your friend who said, I believe in you. If anyone can do it, you can do it. And all that training process with your coach when, and all those other times you dove without headphones, like, we learn by experiences, and those are the memories we create. And so, the ability to tell your kids about hard work and effort and determination and how important those are only goes so far, right? But the ability for them to see, number one, what mommy does and how hard she works, and that she comes down and she's red in the face and she's like huffing and puffing, and that she's like rescheduling everything and she has to do all this stuff. Like, those are experiences that they will remember in the context of, like, not necessarily, wow, my mom like made it to the finals of the Olympic trials when she was 43 and she trained up in the room and blah, 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 blah. But just this ability of like what hard work looks like, what organization looks like, what prioritization looks like, what discipline looks like, right? Those are experiences that are going to get packaged, right, in their memory, and they're going to play out in different ways. But also this ability to have shared part of that experience with you, right? To be able to come on and take turns and rotations with you, to be able to coach you, right? Like, those are such meaningful things that I think are just cool. But like, all those people, you did that with so many other people when you were competing and when you were younger. And now you got to do that with your family, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I think so many of us as competitive athletes, and you said earlier in this conversation, like, doesn't all that make you want to get out on the mat? And like, it does, in a way though, that I want to like redefine my relationship with wrestling, where it's not always about like losing weight, like getting my face pounded in, dealing with everything else that came with it, but like this ability to really kind of appreciate it in a different level, and the experiences I had and the relationships that I built and all that. And to be able to do that with the closest people in your life, I think is so meaningful. The last question I have for you, right? So, and this is really one of the things that really kind of drew me to you and why I wanted to link up with you and chat with you is, again, I'm a big, big believer in doing these things if we're going to teach other people. And I love teaching other people, right? And I continue to compete and train in different things. I'm not getting on a platform and I'm always getting on a map, but like, I'm always doing some crazy workout. And I think you'll appreciate this. Recently, I went out for a run, and, it was going to be like it was like a 6 or 8 mile run. And my wife was like, how long are you going to go for? I'm like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, whatever it is. And she goes, where are your headphones? I'm like, I'm not wearing them. She goes, you're not wearing headphones? And I go, what happens in life when you don't have headphones, right? And she's like, are you seriously saying that right now? I go, she's like, what are you training for? I go, I'm training for life. And sometimes in life, you don't get music. And she's like, you're out of your mind. Get out of here. And I like went out and I knew it was going to be uncomfortable, but I was like, let's do this. Like, so sometimes I will purposely go out and work out without music for that exact idea that like, I don't know in life when we don't have that external inspiration or that music. So I appreciated that. But here's my question. So now that you're a mindset and a performance coach, like what's something that you teach your clients, right, that you wish you knew as a younger athlete?
I mean, I think what the big thing that I've learned is that like we're all going to have challenges. You know, it's not an if, it's a when. But those challenges, they're going to define you in one way or the other. Like, are you going to let them like force you to quit, or are you going to let them be the opportunity that takes you further? So when you face these challenges, like face them, don't run away from them. Like that's the very thing that is going to equip you to do the next thing. So, you know, it's learning to not ignore fear or try to hide it over here, because when we keep thinking about it and we're trying to push it away, we're actually like interacting with it and thinking about it more, and it's in our subconscious more. But if you just handle it, if you just admit what it is and you deal with it, like you diffuse all of its power and you can actually conquer it. You know, it's those type of things. It's not letting things fester. It's committing. Like I also like to talk about how you know, I hate it when people say, I want to try and do my best. Cause I'm like, I feel like that's the biggest cop out in the world. Cause like, you can't try and jump off a 10-meter platform, right? My coach likes to say, you can't dip your toe in from the 10-meter to see if the water feels nice. Like you have to jump in with both feet or you walk down the ladder of shame. Like those are your two choices. So you can commit to doing your best. It may not turn out great, but you will commit to doing your best. You're not trying your best. You're either doing it or you're not. Like a little bit of Yoda here, right? Do or do not. There is no try. And so I think it's those kind of attitudes, it's that kind of mindset walking in, like you need to face things in order to overcome them and move past them. And you need to commit to doing that. Like you can't just try, like you're either going to do this or you're not. And the choice is yours, but it's always a choice, right?
I love that. No, and I think that's spot on. I think this idea of reframing what failure looks like and what fear looks like, right? I think is such an important thing that so many athletes come to me and they don't want to fail and they don't want to be scared. And I talk about it right up front, like the first time, like, listen, these are human experiences. They're human emotions. Like what we're going to do is we're going to help you acknowledge them. We're going to help you accept them and we're going to help you act on them. Right. And so that they become, so I love that you said that. And I think also this idea of language, right? Like how we speak to ourselves and what we say is so incredibly important. And that's a big part of what I preach and what I teach, but it's also something I use actively. And I'm so aware now of what I say and what I don't say and how I say things. And I look back over all of my experiences and even what adults and coaches have said to me. And I'm like, wow, like people, there's really a lack of true understanding and awareness of how powerful language is. And even the subtle words, right, of what we do and what we say is so important. So I love that.
Well,
I
Matt,
think,
and our voice is on 24/7 in our head, right? So if that's the one voice that's weighing you down, like that's the only one you're hearing all the time. And I mean, I like had a crazy inner dialogue when I was younger. Like I was borderline psychotic, I think. But I learned to recognize it and I learned to take hold of it and I learned to change it. And that changed everything, you know.
now this is awesome. This is so exciting. I'm excited to keep talking with you more. Where can people learn about you?
LauraWilkinson.com. That's kind of my main hub for everything. You can get to the podcast from there. There's a getting started button if you want a free guide, and you can hop on my email list. I send out weekly encouraging emails, and I also let you know when all the courses and like workshops are coming up. So that's a great way to stay in touch. And I also live on Instagram. That's where we connected. So I answer all my DMs. So just shoot me a message. Love to say hi.
And what's your Instagram? Because I know it's not Laura
Oh,
Wilkinson.
at Lala the Diver. I mean, if you search Laura Wilkinson, it should come up, but Lala the Diver with some underscores in there.
Love it. Love it. Well, listen, I really appreciate it. Like I said, I'm excited to keep talking with you and learning from you and, you know, working with you in some capacity. Cause I think what you're doing and bringing your experiences and your knowledge and your background and really being able to kind of help other people, I think is just so incredibly valuable. I hope that other people enjoyed this as much as I did. If you did, please consider leaving me a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify. If you don't have access, email me your thoughts, mindsettraininginstitute@gmail.com. If you want to learn more about me and my work, mindsettraininginstitute.com. I'm also on Instagram at Dr. T _sports psych. SPORTSPSYCH. I want to thank Laura Wilkinson. I want to thank the hidden opponent. I want to thank everybody that supports this show. And remember, think great, feel great, be great. Mindset is everything.